All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Let's Talk Recovery. Um, this evening, we're going to be talking about a topic that hits, I believe, every single person in recovery. And that's going to be the topic of the difference between shame and guilt. And all of us in recovery struggle, at least time to time, with shame and with guilt. Um, this is one of the biggest areas where people get stuck. Most of us were never taught how to tell the difference between guilt and shame. And a lot of times I'll hear people talk and they'll just interchange the words. There's not a real clear understanding. When we confuse shame for guilt or guilt for shame, it can completely derail our emotional world. And it can feed a relapse cycle. It can destroy connection and it can leave us feeling hopeless. So that's why I want to dive into this topic tonight. However, when we understand the difference between shame and guilt, when we can name what's actually going on inside, things start to change. You begin to respond instead of reacting, and you begin to repair instead of hiding. You begin to live from identity instead of from fear. So, if you're joining live here tonight, I'd like to see you in the comments post where you're checking in from. I'm always interested in knowing where my viewers are located. And if you're checking in on the replay, the same thing. In the comment, let me know where you're checking in from. And over the course of this evening, if you have questions or comments, put them in there. I'll try to respond to the questions. And I'm interested in hearing what you think about the topic tonight. So, let me start by telling you why this matters so much. Shame and guilt are two of the most powerful emotional forces in our recovery journey. They shape our thoughts, they shape our relationships, they even shape the stories that we believe about ourselves. Guilt, when it's healthy, helps us make repair. Shame, on the other hand, convinces us that we're beyond repair. Guilt says, you made a mistake, now let's fix it. Shame says, nah, we can't fix it because you are the mistake. And when you can't tell the difference, you either end up beating yourself up for things that aren't wrong, or you ignore the things that actually do need your attention. So tonight, we're going to break this down in a way that's simple, practical, and I hope will be deeply healing. So let's start with guilt, because a lot of times guilt gets a bad reputation. A lot of people think that guilt is always negative and it's always unhealthy. But I want to argue that guilt is exactly the opposite. Excuse me, having problems speaking tonight. That guilt is the opposite of that. Guilt is actually an extremely healthy feeling when we respond, when we press in and respond in a healthy way. Guilt is a behavioral emotion. here's what I mean by that. Guilt is tied to something that we have done. It's not connected to who we are. It's related to an action that we have taken. Guilt would be kind of like our conscience tapping us on our shoulder. All of us have seen those cartoons when we were kids where you got an angel on one shoulder and a little devil on the other, and they're whispering in our ears and trying to get our attention. Well, guilt is our conscience tapping us on the shoulder and saying, hey, that thing you just did, that's not who you want to be. Guilt is meant to point us back to alignment with our values. And when guilt is healthy, it leads us to repair, to restoration, and to responsibility. So when guilt rises up, when that sinking feeling shows up in your stomach, we have 3 questions that we need to ask ourselves. And I think guilt always invites us to ask these 3 questions. So the next time you feel guilt, stop. And here's where we need to go. Question number 1 that guilt invites us to ask. Have I violated my own morals or values? So what we're asking, did I act in a way that contradicts the person that I want to be? Did I cross my own integrity? Have I violated my standards? That's question number 1. Have I violated my own morals or values? Question number 2, when we experience guilt. Have I violated God's morals? We ask ourselves, have I acted in a way that goes against what God invites me into? Things like truth, honesty, compassion, integrity. Have I violated God's morals? That's question number 2. And then question number 3, have I caused harm to another person? Did my words, my choices, my actions, did they hurt somebody? Did they confuse them? Did they scare them? Or did they break trust? That idea too of have I caused harm, that doesn't mean that what we did was intentional. It doesn't mean that we meant to cause harm or to hurt them. Sometimes we say or do things and we cause harm and didn't intend to at all, but that harm is still present. So we stop anytime that we experience guilt and we ask those 3 questions. Have I violated my own morals or values? Sorry. I tell you, if you all don't know yet, I am one of the most technologically challenged people you'll ever meet. And I'm doing some goofy little things here that you can't see, but it's causing me confusion. So the 3 questions we ask when we experience guilt, when we feel guilt, we're invited to ask, have I violated my own morals or values? Have I violated God's morals? Or have I caused harm to another person? So I want you to listen closely here. If you can answer yes to any one of these 3 or more, but at least to one of these 3 questions, if you can answer yes, then you're experiencing appropriate guilt. And in this case, in a case like that, guilt is a gift. Now, why would guilt be a gift? The feeling of guilt isn't pleasant. Why would it be a gift? Well, it's because guilt shows me exactly where repair is needed. It gives me clarity and it invites me into responsibility for my actions and my decisions and not into punishment. Now, here's something that's key to this too. If we answered yes to one or more of these questions, then we need to take actions to repair. But if the answer to all three questions are no, then what we're feeling is false guilt. And false guilt is guilt that has no foundation in truth. False guilt may come from fear. It might come from perfectionism. And I've talked in the past about perfectionism. Perfectionism is something that's present in every person that struggles with addiction and compulsive behaviors. False guilt might come from being a people pleaser. We're trying so hard to make everybody else happy, and we feel guilty when we're not able to do that. But the truth is, we can't do that. We can't make everybody happy. False guilt may come from childhood messages like, you are responsible for everybody else's feelings. And some of us grew up in environments like that, where that was expected of us or communicated to us. We're responsible for everybody else's feelings. False guilt may come from trauma. Many times, false guilt comes from shame. And when we experience that false guilt, when we continue to allow ourselves to remain in that false guilt will drain your soul. False guilt will keep you locked in anxiety, and it will keep you apologizing for simply existing. And you don't owe anybody an apology for that. So I want you to hear me clearly here. If you did not violate your values, if you didn't violate God's values, and if you didn't harm anyone, then that guilt that you're experiencing is a lie. Now, it may feel the same as real guilt, but it's a lie. And that guilt doesn't belong to you. Now, we've been talking about guilt. Let's take a look for a few minutes at shame. Shame is not about behavior. Shame is about identity. It's about who I believe myself to be. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says there's something wrong with me. Can you hear that difference? I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me. Shame attacks who you are at your core. Shame tells you that you're unworthy, that you're unlovable, that you're broken, that you're dirty, that you're too much, that you're not enough. But it always ends with you're beyond repair. You can't be redeemed. So how does shame function? Well, shame pushes us into isolation. And isolation is always harmful, always harmful. Shame pushes us into hiding. Shame makes you put up a mask. It makes you pretend to be something that you're not. Shame tells you things like, if people really knew me, they'd run away. They wouldn't want to be around me. Have you ever heard that thought? in your head. If people really knew me, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. That's shame, and that's a lie. Shame fuels addiction because addiction promises relief from the pain of shame. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term toxic shame. Where does that term come from? Where does toxic shame come from? Well, shame many times comes from childhood wounds, things that we were experienced when we were young, things that we were told when we were young. It comes from things like being criticized or being dismissed. What you're saying is wrong, or what you're saying doesn't matter. Shame, toxic shame, can come from trauma or from abuse. Toxic shame can actually come from religious environments that confuse shame with conviction. And there's a difference. Conviction, again, is connected to guilt, not shame. Shame can come from relationships where love was conditional. Have you ever experienced those before? I love you, but only if you do what I want. Shame can come from repeated failure. It can come from internalized voices that are not God's voice. So toxic shame is devastating. But the good news is it's not the end of the story. So when we experience feelings of guilt, we ask our three questions. Have I violated my values? Have I violated God's values? Have I caused harm? If the answer to any of the three is yes, then I'm being invited to make repair. If the answer to all three is no, then what I'm experiencing is false guilt. And that can come from standards that are being placed on me by others. It can come from messages that I've received throughout my lifetime. It can come from unreasonable expectations. And it tells me that I am a failure. Now, here's where what I'm going to say might differ from a few people. And I want to explain what I'm about to say clearly. Some people don't like the term that I'm about to use. And if you don't like it, I'm fine with that. Feel free to use a different term. But the term that I'm going to use here for this next thing I'm going to talk about for a few minutes is the idea of healthy shame. And I believe that there is a healthy shame. For centuries, for many centuries, the idea of healthy shame was present in almost every society. The idea that there are times when we should experience shame, but not shame in that form of toxic shame that says that we're broken and that we're a failure. Now, some experts today, some people that are a lot smarter than I am, will argue that there's no such thing as healthy shame. And I understand why they would argue that. For a lot of people, the word shame is deeply tied to trauma. But I believe that there is a form of shame that's healthy. And so when I say healthy shame, what I'm talking about really is a form of humility. It's a healthy place. So when I talk about healthy shame, I would define healthy shame as an emotional awareness that I am not God. I'm not limitless. I'm not perfect. I need connection. I need community. And I need help. And it's my belief that we are created and designed to need one another. None of us are able to stand completely alone. As much as we want to believe that we are, we're not. I'm not an expert on everything. And I got news for you. You're not either. There are times when we don't have the answers or the ability to do things on our own. And we need to be able to recognize that. And that is a form of healthy shame. Healthy shame grounds us. Healthy shame reminds us that we're human. We're not superhuman. We're not God. We're not in control of everything. We want to believe we are, but we're not. Healthy shame keeps me teachable. It keeps me aware that there are other people that in some areas know more than I do. Healthy shame allows me to ask for and receive help. And if we want to live a healthy life, we have to be able to do that. We have to be able to own and recognize our limitations and ask for help. And ultimately, healthy shame makes repair possible. Healthy shame says, I'm not above correction. I make mistakes sometimes. It says, I don't have all the answers. And it says, I'm part of a community, not the center of it. You know, I've been told I've got a big head. I've been told my head sometimes is so large it has its own gravitational pull. But even with that, I have to recognize that I am not the center of the universe. Healthy shame, that idea of humility, is not the condemnation of our identity. It's a grounding of our identity and the ability for us to see clearly who we are. We're able to see clearly those areas where we are gifted, where we're able to care for ourselves and to assist others. But it allows us to see and own those areas where we lack. And it gives us the ability to ask for help. Now, I want to compare these three things, all right? When we put these three concepts side by side, guilt, healthy shame, and toxic shame. Now, guilt, and again, guilt, when we process it correctly, is a healthy thing. Guilt says, I did something wrong. And it invites us to make repair in the relationships and in the situations where we've committed wrong. Healthy shame says, I'm human. I make mistakes. I don't know it all. And I need others. And the outcome of that understanding is humility in our lives. Toxic shame, on the other hand, says, I'm wrong. I am broken. And the outcome of that is hiding, fear, disconnection, and isolation, which is always, always harmful. What are your thoughts on this? And again, feel free to not like the term that I use of healthy shame. Use a different term. But the idea there is true. If you've got thoughts on this, on guilt, if you have experience with guilt being a good thing, you've recognized that you've caused harm and you've been able to make repair, let me hear about that. Stick something in the comment. Now, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about how to discern what it is that we're feeling. Are we feeling guilt? Are we feeling toxic shame? Are we experiencing humility and healthy shame? We're going to talk about how to tell exactly what's going on inside of us. So, step one, we use the 3 questions of guilt. Have I violated my values? Have I violated God's values? And have I caused harm? We begin with those 3 questions. If the answer is no to all 3, then what we're experiencing may feel like guilt, but it's not guilt. It is not. So we need to look at the direction of that feeling and that emotion. What direction is that feeling driving me in? So we ask ourselves, is this emotion, is this feeling that I'm experiencing as guilt, is that leading me towards repair in a relationship or in a situation? If it is, that's guilt. That's healthy guilt, inviting me to repair damage and harm that I've caused. Is it leading me? Is the feeling leading me towards humility and teachability? Is it allowing me to recognize that I don't have to be perfect and that I don't have to have all the answers, that it's okay for me to ask for help? If the feeling that I'm experiencing is leading us in that direction, then what we're experiencing is what I call healthy shame. And again, feel free to use a different term. Call it humility, call it what you'd like. Or is this feeling that I'm experiencing leading me towards hiding? Is it generating and creating fear and self-condemnation? If that's the result of what we're feeling, then what we're feeling is toxic shame. Now, all of us make mistakes in life. All of us make mistakes. All of us have times when we don't know what to do, when we don't have the answer. All of us do. And when that happens, if we're pushed into isolation, if we're pushed into self-justification, fear and self-condemnation, toxic shame. So it's important for us to pay attention to that voice that's speaking in our head. Toxic shame sounds harsh, condemning, and permanent. You're broken and there's no way you can be repaired. There's no way you can do what's right. That's toxic shame. Guilt sounds specific, and guilt presents an action, a way to make repair in the situation. That can be through an apology. That can be through restitution. That can be through what 12 Steps calls making amends, going back and making things right. That's healthy guilt. Healthy shame sounds grounding and honest. It's the ability to be honest about my weaknesses, but also about my strengths. All of us have weaknesses, but all of us have strengths that can be used to encourage and to help others. We encourage and we help where we can, and we ask for help when needed. Hey, Mark, I see you there, man. I'm sorry that's what you're experiencing. And what I'm going to tell you is that you're not broken. Man, you are not hopeless. You're not. If you've caused harm, if you've made a mistake, if you've violated your morals, God's morals, or you've caused harm, then you have the ability to make repair or to offer repair in that situation. It takes humility. It takes us being willing and able to admit that we don't know it all and that we sometimes make mistakes. That's the opportunity that guilt provides for us. Now, I'm going to take a couple minutes here, and I want to offer some tools that we can use this week. We need to name the feeling and the emotion that we're experiencing. So, when we experience something that feels like guilt, we need to ask ourselves, and again, lots of questions here tonight, but we need to ask ourselves, I'm inviting us that the thing to do is to say out loud, is this guilt? Is this shame? Is this false guilt? And remember, going back to our initial 3 questions, this will identify which column what we're feeling falls under. Have I violated my morals? Have I violated God's morals? Have I caused harm? If the answer is yes, then what we're experiencing is guilt, and that guilt is an invitation and a gift from God to make repair and to make things right. So, name the emotion. What am I feeling? Guilt, shame, false guilt. In response to healthy guilt, there are some steps we can take. We begin by owning our behavior, not by running from it, not by denying it, not by hiding. When the answer to one of those 3 questions is yes, I violated my values. Yes, I violated God's values, or yes, I caused harm, then we own that behavior. We own it. And then we step up and we make repair. It may mean restitution. It may mean an apology. It may mean that we ask the person that we've harmed, what can I do to make this right? But we own the behavior and we make repair. We realign our values. We take a look at how we violated our values or God's values, if that's what's happened. And we realign our values so that we don't commit that same offense again. And we work to restore trust where possible. Those last 2 words are important, where possible. Many times we are able to restore trust, but restoring trust doesn't take place overnight. Restoring trust takes time. and that idea that restoring trust where possible. There are times when the harm that we've caused has broken trust, and we may not be able to restore that again. And we have to be able to recognize that. You know, I heard somebody say recently, the scripture commands forgiveness, but the scripture doesn't command reconciliation. And that's a painful thing to understand. It's a painful thing to understand. You know, I've shared before that my addiction resulted in me spending 2 years in prison. And I caused harm with my behavior. And there are relationships that I damaged that have not been able to be restored. The majority of relationships have been able to be restored, but they didn't take place overnight. In some cases, it took years. There's one relationship specifically that was it was one of the closest relationships that I had, and it's not been able to be restored. But I still have offered an apology. I've offered amends, and I'm choosing to move forward in integrity. So we respond to healthy guilt by owning our behavior, making repair, realigning our values, restoring trust where possible, and then letting go of the guilt. So how do we heal toxic shame? Toxic shame can be difficult because many times it's the result of things we've heard for years, or things that were drilled into us when we were young. And so to heal toxic shame, we have to make a decision to work with safe people. Healing toxic shame may mean that we separate from some people, that the relationships are just not healthy. Toxic shame may need story work. Story work is a type of counseling and a type of therapy that allows us to look back into our history, many times into our family of origin, and to recognize where that harm has been done to create a distorted view of who we are and our role in this world. Story work can be a method of healing from that toxic shame. Trauma-informed reflection and looking back. Healing toxic shame requires confession to safe, trustworthy community. And I would argue and present here that when we're in recovery from addiction, healing from that addiction, recovery from that addiction cannot take place outside of healthy community. We need people around us that we can trust, that we can be honest with. That idea of intimacy and that definition of intimacy that I like so well. Intimacy is a place where I want to be with you, you want to be with me, and there's no fear of shame or guilt. Healing from toxic shame can involve daily check-ins with a sponsor or a close friend. And it can require rewriting the false narratives that shame created. One of the tools that I use is I identify those beliefs that I've been holding on to that are false. I'm damaged. I'm a failure. I can never do better. And I'll write those things down. And then next to those lies, I'll write the truth. The truth. Healing of toxic shame. When we're experiencing false guilt, again, back to the 3 initial questions I talked about. Have I violated my values? Have I violated God's values? Have I caused harm? If the answer to those 3 questions is no, then we're experiencing false guilt that may be coming through attempts to people please, which isn't possible, or it can be the result of shame. In releasing false guilt, I'd invite you to say, this guilt did not come from my values. This guilt did not come from God. And this guilt did not come from my harming anyone. This guilt is not mine to carry. And then we set it aside. That's possible it'll come back, but when it does, we respond in the same way. We respond in the same way. So I want to throw out there too, if you're listening tonight and you struggle with false guilt, you struggle with shame, with toxic shame, I have a worksheet that I use with clients that I'm going to offer to you tonight. It's called Lies We Believe. And it's a worksheet where we identify those lies that shame whispers in our ear. And then we speak the truth into those situations. It's a simple worksheet. And I'll just say that if you're struggling with shame, if you're struggling with false guilt, and you'd be interested in having a copy of that worksheet, shoot me an email. You can go to my website, rw-coaching. It's here in the comments, rw-coaching.com. You can reach out to me there. You can reach out to me here through Facebook Messenger. You can reach out to me through my email, rwcoaching2@gmail.com. But shoot me a message. Make sure that you give me your email so I have a place to send it to. And I'll be happy to send you a copy of that worksheet, Lies We Believe. I found it to be a powerful tool in helping me to battle those messages of shame and of false guilt. So, I've got a few questions for you. We're coming up on the end of our time together tonight. And I have a few questions. You can jump into the comments here on the live. If you're watching this on a replay on Facebook or on one of my other platforms, all of my platforms are listed at the bottom of the homepage of my website. Again, that's rw-coaching.com. If you're watching this tonight live or through a replay, I go back and check the comments on the replays where this video is posted. Here are some questions for you, and I'd like to hear your answers to these. Question number 1, where do you tend to confuse guilt and shame? Is that something that you struggle with occasionally? With deciding, is what I am telling myself, is that voice that's whispering in my ear, is this actual guilt, or is this shame that needs to be addressed? Where do you tend to confuse guilt and shame? Question number 2. Which of the 3 questions of guilt? Have I violated my values? Have I violated God's values? Have I caused harm? Which of those 3 questions of guilt is the most revealing for you? Which of those 3 questions is the one that you would say perhaps that you struggle with the most? Question number 3. Where does toxic shame show up in your story? How does that manifest itself? Are there messages today? Are there things that you still believe about yourself today that are lies that were presented to you when you were a child? How does toxic shame show up in your story? And then question number 4, what is healthy shame or humility? What does that look like for you these days? Are you able to accept the fact that you're not God, that you're not in control of everything around you? Are you able to accept the fact that you don't know everything and that sometimes we all make mistakes? Are you able to accept that? When needed, are you able to ask for help? For me, that is one of the biggest things with toxic shame and coming to a healthy place. It was obvious a lot of times in my life that I didn't have all the answers, that I didn't know everything. Many times when it was clear to me that I didn't have any idea what the right answer was for my situation. But the thing that I couldn't do, I couldn't bring myself to do, was to ask for help. Are you able to ask for help and to receive that help? Again, feel free to stick some answers to those questions in the comments here or later in the repost of this video. I want to thank each of you that are here tonight, that have been here tonight. I want to thank you for being here. In my mind, learning to recognize the difference between guilt, between false guilt, and between shame, learning to be able to identify these things, learning to move into a healthy place in these areas. This is deep work. It's ongoing work. And I'm proud of you for stepping into it. Tonight might be a beginning for you, or it may be that this is something you've been working on and dealing with for a while. But I'm proud of you that you're willing to listen. You're willing to engage, and hopefully you're willing to continue to press into this journey of identifying shame, ridding yourself of the lie, putting it behind you, and moving forward in the light and in the truth. I want you to remember, guilt calls us to repair. Guilt is a healthy thing that invites us to make repair where we've violated our values or where we've caused harm. Shame calls us to hide and to isolate. And that is always a place of harm for us emotionally. Healthy shame calls us to humility. It's the ability to admit that I don't know everything that I make mistakes and that it's okay for me to ask for help. If you want to talk more about this or you need support in your own recovery journey, feel free to email me at rwcoaching2@gmail.com. You can go to my website. You can reach out to me there. You can send me a message here on Facebook Messenger. And again, that worksheet, Lies We Believe. It helps us to identify those lies that shame has planted in our soul. This worksheet helps us to identify those lies and then to recognize the truth and to stand in that truth. If you'd like a copy of that worksheet, shoot me a message. Email, Facebook Messenger, and I'd be happy to send you that worksheet. All right. I appreciate everybody being here. Don't know if you're still here, Mark, but if you are, man, I love you, brother, and I miss you. All right. We're done for the evening. Feel free to shoot me any questions, any comments, and I'll be back here next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll talk recovery again. Have a good evening.